Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
Good afternoon. We have this 3:30 p.m. spot. We're going to start to get going here. Thank you for joining us to learn about unlocking condo production in Oregon. I'm going to start with just a couple of sort of framing, opening things. We want to find out who all is in this room, but first I'll introduce ourselves in this panel. My name is Shannon Tennant. I use she, her pronouns, Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Oregon. We also convened the Unlocking Homeownership Coalition this recent legislative session. We have with us Michelle Rosa from Buchalter, who is an attorney who works on many Lyft homeownership and Lyft rental projects and also supports condos with for-profit and nonprofit developers, and sometimes does things like write legal opinions for Freddie Mac on condos. And Mark McMullen is here from the Common Sense Institute, who did a study on the need for some condo defect liability reform in our state, and also worked as an economist for the state of Oregon for quite a few years. That's our team. But we want to know who you are. So if you in this audience are someone who is a for-profit developer of some sort, could we see hands go in the air? Great. Do we have any architects with us today? Oh, awesome. How about some nonprofit developers of rental or home ownership? Great. Do we have any attorneys with us? Okay. Any folks who work with a municipality in some level at a county or city? And how about any legislators in the room? Yay! Thank you, Rep. Gamba. Did I leave anyone out who wants to share your role? Lenders. We'd love to see lenders in the room. Thank you for joining us. Great, come on in. Well, without too much more ado, we just want to do one more thing, and I might walk around because this is being recorded and we want to capture what you say. We want to hear from you. What are you hoping to get out of this particular session? And we'll try to frame what we're doing accordingly. Yes?
So next steps to prepare Oregon to be able to bring a full social housing program to bear.
Amazing. So mass producing new home ownership opportunities statewide, yay. Any other things we're looking to learn in this session in particular?
Easier path to condoization.
Great. Yeah, come in.
Hopefully here there's a less litigated path to condoization.
Yes, that is largely our motivation. Any other? I'm coming. Bjorn. Okay. Here we go.
I'm very curious about how private insurers are pricing in the new legislation and what other market players are seeing.
We are too. Yep. Okay. Well, we can start to jump in. This is to say, please don't be shy, right? We'll pause. We'll have some audience interaction moments here planned in this workshop. But also, if you have a burning question or you feel like this isn't quite what I wanted to know, can you tell me about this? This is your workshop. We're here for you. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Mark.
Great, thanks, Shannon, and I'll just second that. Feel free to cut in. I'd very much rather talk about what you all are interested in rather than what I have, prepared already. So, and what I'm going to do is really at a very high level to lead into this, and I'm sure you'll be much more interested in what Shannon and Michelle have to say following me about the ground level issues here in Oregon. But I'm an economist, and I'll just talk really at a high level about the market for condos and their role and their place in the regional economy over time. So my background, having been chief economist for the state of Oregon for 14 years, longest serving under 4 governors, don't have a lot of ground level knowledge. So you'll see that right away. But I will talk about how we compare to other states in terms of some of these liability constraints, in terms of what we've seen in the production stream over time, and where we are in terms of home ownership and the like. And so for home ownership, we're a little bit lucky insofar as Thursday, the new numbers came out. The new census numbers for 2024 on home ownership came out on Thursday, and it's really kind of like a nerd Christmas, where I got together with all my old colleagues first thing in the morning in our PJs and started going through, you know, what we're seeing in Oregon. And some of it's pretty exciting. I know I'm getting away from the topic here, but we are seeing very little in terms of growth in the number of households compared to other states. Still at the rock bottom there, but in terms of income growth, it's really, you know, outstanding. Family household incomes are, you know, ranked number 8 across all states in 2024. And it's very likely that we're going to be going toward a new paradigm where our growth isn't no longer driven, as it has been in the past, by labor force growth and population growth and bringing all these households in. Although there's some positives there too. We're now above water in terms of migration from other states, net migration, a lot of that driven by older households, but we are now have our heads above water. But you know, there are a couple different ways states go when they start to see populations slow down, right? There's what happens it's happened in the Farm Belt and the Rust Belt, where the anchor industries go away, there are no jobs, and so you lose people, and you know, we don't see the bounce back there. But there are others that are success stories where it's just slower population growth, but they depend more on productivity growth and capital accumulation. Places like California and Massachusetts that tend to be above average in terms of their economic gains, but not so much in terms of population gains. Now, I think we're probably going to be somewhere in between. Oregon, it's still a draw to people. You know, everyone here who lives here knows it's a wonderful place. And so we've had the same experience in the early 80s that they did in the Rust Belt or the Farm Belt, where when the timber industry left and, you know, decimated all the towns, there were no jobs, people had to leave because there were no jobs. Coos Bay and Lincoln City lost just as many jobs as a percentage of their workforce as did Flint, Michigan and Youngstown, Ohio. But where Youngstown, Ohio and Flint, Michigan still have a third fewer people there than they did before, Coos Bay and Lincoln City don't. They still have as many people as they did there before, and it grows very slowly, but, you know, we're growing. You know, so there's something. But this one was different. This one, you know, at the time we started to see a population stall the last couple of years. It wasn't the same sort of dynamic because we had, you know, record low unemployment rates. Almost anyone who wanted a job could get one. And so yet we were losing population. A lot of it had to do with affordability in hindsight. It was really tough to get into the market, and the condo story is a big part of that. And so we really do stand out in terms of relative to other states in terms of the penetration of condos in the market. I heard condoization, I'd never heard that term before, but I think I'll adopt it going forward. But we've not only had arguably the most restrictive construction defect liability laws in the country, but that seems to be, you know, showing in terms of the numbers. Now, these are the new 2024 numbers that came out on Thursday. And the main difference between what we've seen in the past is the U.S. number has come down some. I'm defining condos here as 5+ unit buildings owner occupied. So that's a loose definition, but it's what we're working with the census data. But we're still, half the rate of the rest of the country in terms of the condo ownership. And so that's an issue, largely because it's a very effective way to get into the market for folks, because it is relatively affordable. We're still looking at more than a third cheaper than a single family unit. And right now, when people are having so many barriers to getting in and starting into home ownership, this is certainly not the silver bullet, but it's something that we could certainly benefit from going forward. So some of it has had to do in recent years with, I mean, not even so recent anymore, with market forces. So we had the housing crash. And after the housing crash, you see here the blue line is condo development here in Oregon, even including 2024, which was a little improved. We've really been bouncing along the bottom. No real improvement in condo development since that crash. Now, at first, we weren't an outlier. All states saw this kind of crash in condo development. And that was, basically market forces. The story was rents were so high relative to prices of housing right after the crash that developers were all moving towards apartments because the rents were so high, the vacancy rates were so low, and it just made sense to build apartments rather than condominiums. But now in recent years, the last 7, 5, or 8 years, we've seen that those price to rent ratios kind of normalize. But at the same time, and so in other states, we've seen a pickup in condo development across the board in most places, most regions of the country. But unfortunately, not yet here in Oregon. And again, a lot of that might have to do with our really restrictive construction defect liability laws, which we hear a lot anecdotally about. Now, our experts on the panel will talk about the details of those laws. I'm not a lawyer and do a terrible job of reading statute, but basically there are several ways where we've been restrictive, particularly in our statute of repose, or loosely speaking, statute of limitations, almost the same sort of thing, where we've had a longer one than other states, and now we've come down. We're still longer than most states, but in line with Nevada, Colorado, Washington, our neighbors now, at 7 years. And we've instituted, some more controls on homeowner organizations in terms of, when they can, start to, make claims. We've, made some more right to repair, where maybe we can get some win-win between the developer and the homeowner. We've given the homeowner some more ability to repair their own places, and in Oregon, moisture inspection is a big thing. So I'll let these folks talk about the details on that, but to date, and of course our new law, which has brought us closer to we're still, again, one of the places that has a lot of consumer protections, but we're closer to other states at this point, that's going to really ramp up here in January of 2026. So we'll see if that makes a dent in the numbers going forward. But to date, not a whole lot. But there is, obviously, as I said before, over a third in terms of the price differential. And that's really important, right? So, it's important, why should we care is one thing I'm always asked. And it's like, well, why should we care if we have a condo unit versus an apartment unit? A unit's a unit. It's a place where people can live. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is really in wealth generation. Insofar as, here in Oregon, the vast majority of our households don't have a really diverse portfolio where they have, stock holdings and investment assets and own businesses and whatnot, which are growing their wealth. The vast majority of their wealth is coming from their home equity. And so, in the last several years, when we've seen people really locked out of this home ownership market, it really constrains this ability to grow wealth over time. And that's trouble across the board. It's trouble, in terms of our rural-urban mix, and in particular, in terms of race and ethnicity, where we have these much broader disparities in wealth than we do in income. We know we have huge income disparities across different communities in Oregon, but the wealth disparities are far more vast, in terms of, this generational wealth and the ability to build it. And so being able to get in to a house is really paramount to that, just because that's the main instrument for wealth generation that we see here. It really gives a path. Home ownership really does give a path toward that. And so I don't know, I'd love to hear back from the group, as we go through this, to what extent the new law, which is a step in the right direction, might stimulate this, just given how far we dropped. We went from, 4,200 units a year before the housing crash in 2026 and dropped by over 90% down to about 300 units a year. So the market was really decimated. And so I assume that, again, there's some market forces going on here that are above and beyond the construction defect liability. But nevertheless, I think this is a step in the right direction, and may well bear some fruit going forward. So yeah, you see here the difference in prices. Those prices are across the affordability spectrum. So we're talking about they're of course largest at the smaller condominiums, and but are still across the size spectrum. So even when you're getting a really big condominium, 4+ bedrooms, we're still seeing a big discrepancy there in terms of the affordability. And so that's something. And I think it's something not just for the home ownership, but for the regional economy as a whole. Because it's clear that, like I say, it wasn't the lack of jobs this time that really stalled our population gains. And it really does look like housing affordability had a lot to do with it because of the patterns we saw, right? We still, in terms of interstate or where people are moving to and coming from, we still saw just the same kind of flow from California, as we always do. And you look at the DMV records and people turning in their California driver's licenses to get Oregon ones, same as always. And you talk to the folks in Bend in Central Oregon, that's same as it's always been, and we're getting these, but of course, they're still a more expensive market than we are. And where do we see people moving to? To a lot of the less expensive markets. Particularly, you saw rural Oregon and rural Washington. Klamath Falls saw positive population gains for the first time in ages during the pandemic. And of course, people going to other states that are less expensive, Idaho, Texas, places like that. And so that suggests, again, affordability being a big factor. Another factor is when we saw people moving out of Oregon, and particularly out of this Portland metropolitan area, half of the people moving out were children. And so that speaks to maybe households looking for more space, or looking for a backyard, or looking for things that they couldn't afford in an urban area. And so, all told, I think there is a real economic role. It's not it's not everything, it's not a panacea, but I think additional condo development, could really spur growth. And I think if you folks could continue to put pressure on your legislators and your policymakers to try to advance this, I think it really would go a long way towards spurring the regional economy. So with that, I'm just about out of my time, but we'll take, if there are a couple of questions. If not, we're going to go ahead and have you guys do a little discussion among yourselves for a couple of minutes to go ahead and get on to the rest of the program, which again is going to probably be more valuable for you than my high-level junk. Yeah.
So I do have a question that relates to sort of the ancillary costs to owning a condominium. So condominium fees versus like if you own a single family home. Obviously there may be HOA fees with that, but is there a factor there that basically people sort of went, I want to do a condominium and then realised it's as expensive as a single family home on a monthly basis?
Anecdotally, yes. I've heard that a lot. Now, I haven't seen any real hard data across, aggregated across time, but anecdotally, that is a pretty big issue. And in terms of, and this legislation, and again, I'm going to defer to the experts on the panel, but this legislation does allow some homeowners to take charge of some of that. Oh, yes.
I'm Michelle. I practice condominium law and association law every day. So I want to address that question because it's a really, I think it's an important one. What I always tell people is that it's a falsehood that it costs more. It just costs more in the moment. And it allows for a piece of property collectively to be taken care of over time when we're saving collectively bit by bit versus single family homes where if you need a roof, well, 15 years from now you need $15,000. Did you save that? Do you need to get refinanced to get it, or a HELOC? That's what often happens, right? So I think what I've seen is that in good times that concern disappears. In bad times, and I'm going to call recent times sort of bad, in bad times where the interest rates went up, right? And at entry-level housing, which we're hoping condominium units help to fill that need for entry-level housing, this became a really big deal, the assessments that are due, because I have so much to spend on my home. 6 months ago, I had a lot more money that I could have bought and it afforded my assessments, and now because of the interest rates, I cannot. So I saw this pinch follow economic hardship. But again, it's because I'm just trying to get in right now, right? It's the only house I can afford, but I can't afford the assessments. And that combination was suppressing a lot of the sales for my entry-level housing developers, like the infill, the small little houses that we need. Like, that's exactly the housing stock that we need desperately. But it also was the buyers for those homes are the ones that were the most sensitive economically to the interest rate hike. Nonetheless, and my nonprofit developers have learned this over time, they have to have their homeowners pay in a condominium or in any other situation, we hope, into some kind of savings so that 10, 15, 20 years from now, they can actually take care of their home. And that's true at every economic level, but of course, the more you make and the more you have in discretionary spending money, the more you're able to say, yeah, I will have $15,000 or $20,000 in 15 years. So it's really important from my perspective, And I advise my affordable housing developers particularly to make sure that the assessments are going to meet the needs of that collective building, so that that asset is both financeable and worth as much as one would hope that it will appreciate. So it's like invest now, invest later, pay now, pay later. It's a really hard equation. It becomes harder when interest rates are high. Yes?
As a lender, I agree that condominium is an affordable entry
repeat it?
for homeowners and stuff like that. But the HOA, Fannie and Freddie count that as a debt to, and then has to be included in the ratio. That's often deter people from being able to afford buying even condominium because of the HOA. So we need to have, how do you call that? We need to reach out to Fannie and Freddie to consider that, because when you buy a single-family residence, you have to pay your water, you have to pay your sewers, you have to pay your garbage, right? When you buy condominium, often those three are included in the HOA. But yet, as a lender, I have to include that in the debt-to-income ratio, where if someone's buying a single-family residence, I don't have to include any of their expenses.
Okay, I have the hard task, if I may, thank you for that. It's really a great comment, but I have the hard task of summarizing it because we're being recorded. So the very apt comment circled around the fact that Fannie and Freddie, and I'll throw VA in there too, takes the assessments that one pays, it will be due out of a condominium unit purchase, and they feature that as a debt in the income ratio, the allowable income ratio, debt to income ratio. So that can push, like I said, some of these sensitive first-time entry-level buyers out of the market. The suggestion was that we should be talking to Fannie and Freddie and saying, look, that's true for single-family homes too. You have to pay your garbage, you have to pay your water, you've got to pay your insurance premiums, and those don't get featured in that ratio. So there's something of like, it's a little unfair. I don't think you said that, but that's my commentary. Thank you for the comment.
Those are great, great points. Well, I think maybe just in the spirit of keeping things moving around or moving along, to jump on into the legislation that did just pass. So HB 3746, woohoo, it passed, right? And at a high level and a non-attorney advocate way, I'm going to talk through the components of this legislation, and then Michelle can talk about, for developers, what might this mean and how might you be implementing this on the ground concretely. So this is our goal. So again, this is one of the priorities of the Unlocking Homeownership Coalition that came together prior to this budget session, and will continue forward with homeownership-related advocacy. So I'm just going to go through in broad terms the challenge that each piece of this 14-page engrossed bill addresses, right? So first, a challenge is that Oregon's construction defect liability timeline has been longer than other Western states, as Mark shared, right? So at 10 years. And some of our states in the region are at 6 years. Where we landed as a compromise in this bill, right, is at 7 years. But if something is found right towards the end of that term, then the association gets 1 more year. So it effectively works out to be 8 years. So it was a compromise between 6 and 10 years, but it is shorter. It is shorter. Then this is maybe a thing, right? So condo boards. Has anyone been to condo board school? Oh, okay, I'll take it, great. So it's not a big thing, right? You purchase a condo, but how do you go about being a condo board member, right? So condo boards and officers maybe lack the expertise needed to ensure structural integrity. Are they building inspectors necessarily, right? So there's this huge role that has some legal implications with maybe a dearth of training. So the sort of weird back-end thing that we attempted to do in this legislation is enact 3 scheduled moisture barrier inspections. And I actually think this is really, really important. So the first one, the developer completes prior to sale. So as well as all the other normal inspections, right, that we do in Oregon, there's going to be this additional moisture barrier inspection before sale. And then funded through the reserve account that's established for the condo 24 months prior to 24 months after occupancy, there's a second inspection. And this timeline is pretty deliberate, right? Because there are some warranties that a builder is on the hook for anyways. So some of the deliberate timing there. And the idea is that the builder is basically funding forward this second inspection that's about 2 years after occupancy. But the third one, the condo association is going to pay for at the 60 to 72 month mark. And we also thought, as we talked together, that it was real important that the condo association pick, like, how robust of an inspection do we want to do, right? Because again, this is within the statute, defect, liability, and repose. And the idea is that each of these sort of like stops on the journey is going to help gauge and make sure that assessments are toggled right and appropriate. And goodness knows, if there is a moisture issue with a condo, do you want to wait 10 years to address that? Anybody? No. As soon as you can, you want to get in there and address it. So that's the rationale in this legislation. Another one is just that condo defect litigation, right, is time and cost intensive for all parties involved, right? So you found out there's a moisture inspection. Let's do a lawsuit for 24, 36 months before what? Like, no, fix it, right? Get in there and fix it. So we've done our darndest in the statute to make it really clear that the initial developer of the condo has a right to get in there and repair. And as an association, like if that builder is no longer in business or doesn't have the skill set, like you don't have to hire them, but they could pay for it in lieu of you're going through a lawsuit for a long time, right? So this right to repair, we think, is actually key. Our friends in Colorado have been working hard to get this, that we just got at Oregon this session, so we're really beyond delighted. Just one more big thing here, and it is a big deal. So some condo owners have been surprised by an inability to sell their unit while the association engages in litigation. So if you didn't know, if you own a condo and your board has voted to pursue litigation and you're actively in litigation, you can't sell your home. And some people were surprised, right, by that information. So there's if you read the statute, a very robust protocol for informing every owner, and also like making sure the owner knows how to get in touch with members of their officers of their condo association board if they have concerns. That everyone understands this dynamic really clearly is part of this statute. I think it's like maybe 4 pages of this 14-page statute is how you notify all the owners, the specific protocol in here. And then timeline for enactment. So the required moisture intrusion inspection at turnover meeting, that's actually now in effect ever since the governor signed the statute at the end of July, I think it was. So it's in effect now. The reduction in the statutes of repose and the moisture inspections at years 2 and 6, those are going to get triggered when the declarations are filed after January 1st of 2026. So it's not quite in effect yet, but it's about to be, so it's good to know about now. So January 1st, if your declarations aren't filed yet, you need to pay for these moisture intrusion inspections, right, 2 years out. These are real things. And because of this legislative process, you hear from everyone and realize as comprehensive as you've tried to be, there's something you haven't thought of, right? There's a key exclusion in here. So if you have built and sold condos that really act a lot like single-family homes, and what I mean by that is that instead of paying collectively to maintain shared buildings, for example, you as the owner are still responsible for all of your interior and exterior maintenance of your home. You are cut out of this bill effectively. So you still have a 10-year statute of repose without the extra moisture inspection. So if it's a detached duplex, which happened to be platted as a condo because of some random setback requirement, for example, like you're just not part of this. You just are treated more like a single family home at the end of the day. I see a question.
I'm just curious about that exclusion. You mentioned the detached duplex, but what about a townhome?
Yeah, so there was a question about a townhome kind of scenario, and I'm going to hand the microphone to the attorney sitting to my right.
Okay, so this is bleeding over into what I'm going to say, but it's a really good question, so I want to answer it for you in real time. This statute does, in fact, not only amend the Condominium Act, but also the Planned Community Act. And if you have townhomes, and usually people mean townhomes on a zero lot line lot, little skinny lots, the walls on a common boundary. I condominiumize, there's a fake word again. You said condoization. Well, this one also is not a word, but I use it all the time. I condominiumize townhomes all the time. Townhomes being an up and down attached wall building style, right? So you can make condominiums out of those all day long, but they're not going to be sitting on their own lot. With a townhome that's sitting on its own lot, it's going to be under the Planned Community Act, not the Condominium Act. This statute does reach, the statute of repose does reach those if they are maintained by the association. If your townhome, on the other hand, that the CC&Rs are written so that you have to take care of the exterior as well as the inside of your townhome, notwithstanding that it's common, or it used to be even more common, that an HOA would come along and collectively save for the roof and replace the roof, would collectively save for painting and do the painting. More and more we see them treated like brownstones in Boston or Philadelphia, where it's all up to you on your lot. And if that's the case, this doesn't reach you. Okay, so the statute of repose, as Shannon said, would remain the same. You don't have the inspections, and this is not applicable. However, if you're in one of those townhomes under the Planned Community Act, then you can, the statute of repose reduction would reach your home on your HOA if the HOA had responsibility for taking care of the exterior of your house. And there are no inspection requirements there. This is what I find curious. It's not like an even-handed treatment between attached housing on its own lot and condominiums. We might want to look at that in the future. But they're not required to do the 3 inspections. Yeah, right? It's an interesting dichotomy. But attached housing that's under the Planned Community Act would have all the notice and the extra procedures that would bind the association to notify their owners, warn them that if they went into a condominium, a defect, a construction defect claim, if they became plaintiffs in that situation, that it could endanger their home. The warnings, the notices, the vote of the membership in order to approve of that kind of proactive construction defect claim is the same between the 2 kinds of housing. Does that help? Very much. Okay.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm actually very comfortable handing this to you for your portion, unless there's some other questions right now.
Yeah, does the clock start over when you, let's say, put a new system or a new roof on a building, for example? Asking for a friend.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to do some technical stuff. And if it gets too painful, just like put your heads down and, like this. Because I used to be a middle school teacher, and that's literally what kids do when you are over talking. They just put their heads down or start doing much worse things. Don't do those. But if you want to put your head down and let me know that I'm talking too much, just go ahead. It'll give me a clue. So I'm going to go over some of the technicalities in this and where you'd find them, because, when you pick up this bill, it's not a lot of fun to read. Bills always come where they have the whole statute in it that they're amending, and then if it's bolded, it's new stuff that's being put in, and if it's italics, it's stuff that's pulled out. I love some of the stuff that's in here, the little nuggets, the hidden ones that are being pulled out. I will talk about those at the end if you remind me. Okay. So this statute actually, it amends 4 different chapters in the Oregon Revised Statutes. One is Chapter 12, which is civil procedure. That's where you find this whole idea of for how long after discovery you can bring a claim for construction defects. That's in Chapter 12. So this modifies Chapter 12, 135, which deals with associations and construction defects. It doesn't change the statute of limitations, as it's often called, which is for negligence. Most of these claims are brought in negligence or under contract. Those aren't changed. But what often is called the statute of repose, as in rest in peace forever, no more claims, they're dead, that's the 10-year marker that's been reduced to 7 for both the Planned Community Act attached housing, where the association is in charge of the maintenance, and condominiums, okay? Then it also modifies the Planned Community Act, which is ORS Chapter 94, the Condominium Act, Chapter 100, and then it reaches really quite deeply into, and you were alluding to this, Chapter 701, which is the 700s are all about professions and licensure and, from dentists to contractors. 701 is about contractors. So it modifies what contractors need to do when they're faced with a defects claim and what the owner needs to do in response. So that's the part that Shannon, I think, is really excited about, is it allows for a different kind of interaction between a contractor who is meeting a claim and a homeowner, or an association in this case, who's making the claim. One, the right to repair is significant. Two, it clarifies what happens if a contractor makes an offer to repair or an offer to pay cash that would pay for repair. And what an owner can do in that case, deny it because it's really not enough. You're crazy. It's going to cost more to fix that, accept it, and then what happens next if they accept that offer? In the past, it's been sort of amorphous, and if you didn't really sign a really good settlement agreement with a really good attorney, you might be facing that defect claim again sometime. So likewise, you may have been hesitant to do a repair because you might then restart that clock. That 2-year clock for negligence, 6-year clock for contract, usually it's a negligence one, and the statute of repose. So I go in at year 3, I repair the roof, and it all starts over. So a lot of times I have said to my developers, yeah, you'd be better off paying money because you're going to be restarting that clock. They can come and get you again later on, and this reduces that liability. So there is some exposure reduction, both in the statute of repose, that 10-year knocked back to 7, but there's also some procedural rules now in place as between associations and their contractors and developers that will help, I think, mitigate some of the exposure that developers and contractors who build condominiums, and even lenders are really sensitive to this. Like lenders who lend on condominiums, they sometimes, if it's a multifamily building, I'll see, not infrequently, something that says, you can't make this into a condominium for 10 years because of that statute of repose. So we're hoping that not only new condominiums, but conversion condominiums would find their way to be more attractive, less risky, because of the changes in the statute. So let me tell you a little more. You want a question? Yes? Yeah, go ahead. Shannon's going to take that.
I'm going to attempt. So the question is, like, the original developer, say year 6 or something, there's a repair. Does that restart the whole clock? No, if they pay, because you mentioned something about liability if they pay for it. So the condo association has to find a contractor who will accept that 7-year clock.
Do you want me to take that one? Yeah. So the statute provides, this is section 12, so we're getting towards the end of this very long statute. But it says that if an owner accepts payment of an amount equal to the cost of remediation, the owner has to make a good faith effort to actually get a contractor and complete the remediation. They can't just take the money and go to Bermuda, right? Or Yosemite, that might be more like it, I don't know. And if the owner accepts an offer to perform remediation, the completion of the remediation satisfies the claims by the owners for those defects included. So if you want to take a money offer because you find it fair, then you're supposed to get the repairs done. And two, once that's done, the claims for the original defendant or the original contractor who is facing the defect claim, that ends that claim. Yeah.
And as it's written, I think we got this right. It doesn't restart the clock. I think that's the yeah. So it does not. You're still on that original sort of compliance clock. Yes.
That is true. So he said if contractor A gets hit with the original defect claim, the owner accepts an offer of money payment, the defect is remediated, paid for by that offer, that's the money, then the contractor who comes and does the repair could, if they do it badly, themselves face a defects claim. Yeah, you don't get, you're not off the hook forever if you're a contractor and you just go repair things for people. So that is the case, yes. What's interesting to me about this repair and not repair, and this is going to take a little bit of a left turn here, but one is the idea that substantial completion is a defined term that's redefined in Chapter 12, back in that statute of procedure, civil procedure. And it gets used as it's redefined, both in the Condominium Act and in the Planned Community Act, to tell you when, in fact, for instance, these 3 moisture intrusion inspections are due. It's not an easy thing. I wish it had been when the condominium or the declaration got recorded, because you can just look in the statute. I mean, you live in the county records and go, oh, that was the day. But, Chloe, nice to see another lender in the room, Chloe from Summit. But if you hear substantial completion is what's going to start the clock. Okay, and substantial completion can be either certificate of occupancy, it can be an owner accepting completion, and this doesn't really apply because we're not owner-builder relationship is attenuated here generally. Occupancy itself would start the clock. It's the earliest of these things. So you have to look at that. You have to look at that definition to know what's going on in the rest of it. Additionally, it talks about substantial completion of what? And that part really makes me curious about what next we might need to do to this statute. And it talks about, and this isn't very much different than it was before, it's construction, alteration, or repair of the improvement to real property. So any of those things. That leads me to believe that this applies to conversion condominiums as well as new ones, because often a conversion condominium, technically speaking under the Oregon Condominium Act, is, and this is not a loose term, it's a term of art. A conversion condominium is when you have a residential building, you have residential tenants inside the building, and then you want to change it from a rental property into an ownership property that's going to be owned under a condominium regime. That, and only that, is a conversion condominium. So most of my developers who do conversion condominiums, they go in and they spiff it up. They spiff up that building. And sometimes do they not only spiff up, but they do repairs. And often they'll put a new roof on, for instance. that would trigger this statute. And what I'm unclear about is whether that triggers the need in 2 years or before the turnover or in 6 years to just inspect the roof or the whole building. And I think that the statute probably needs some more clarification on that point. But all good statutes start somewhere, and then we come back and we improve them, and we improve them. You've been involved. I know you have. HB 2001, Shannon's been carrying a lot of water on a lot of really important legislation for a long time. And she and I have worked on those together over the years many times. So this is the process. But I want you to know I still have questions about this bill. Like I do when I read almost any new bill that's really ambitious and is going to change things in a way that's important. And I think that this one fits that description. So let me just see if there's anything else. Go ahead, Shannon.
I think there's probably one question that I think was raised earlier that I want to speak to with like we hope versus we know. And also we think this bill gives us all some room for advocacy, right? So like, oh, so the statute of liability and repose is tighter and more closely aligns with Western states. Like, does that mean our insurance is cheaper?
We hope.
Right.
Campus, 27 grand. Laurelhurst, 150 grand in insurance.
Yeah, so let's talk about this for a second. So before advocating for this legislation, right, I talked to my colleagues from other states who've been working on this too. And something I learned from those colleagues, they're like, even if you make the right tweak and the best possible change, it's probably going to take a few years to really start saving a lot on insurance. I'm sorry, I'm just the messenger. Like,
We cannot get Laurelhurst insured.
Yeah.
We've been at this for 9 months now. We still
Yeah.
cannot get it insured for condo defect.
So here's what I think I've learned, right, in talking to people on this particular piece, is that what actually I think in real life needs to happen is that we need to have a reduction in condo defect litigation over time. Right? So it's nice to say like, oh, you changed some things on your books. That's nice. My job is to make you pay as much as possible for insurance always. Like if I'm selling insurance to you, I don't just like look for reasons to reduce my premiums, right? That's just real. There has to be a rationale. And so really it probably means that reduced litigation over time, but there's the beginning of a case that we can all make with our insurers to say like, hey, just a second, the statute of liability lines up with our Western states better now, and this right to repair is robust, and did you see this notification for the unit owners? But we are gonna have to very actively and vocally advocate for that. They aren't gonna magically reduce, they aren't gonna be like reading the statute and like, great, I can give them a discount now. Like, no, I wish, right? But I don't think that's realistic. I think really we have to be the rabble rousers, and we have to get it going, like actually building more condos and having people use the right to repair, and not having such a high rate of litigation is going to drive down those rates, but it's going to take a minute, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's real. I wanted to, before I open it up, I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I'm really eager to answer them. I'll come back to you in just a sec. I wanted to give you my favorite little nuggets that are buried in here, though. I'm going to nerd out for a second. So one of them is that on a condominium plat, you don't have to measure and map every single limited common element. Let me tell you how awesome that is. What happens is, as a practical matter, there's common elements and there's units. There's only two kinds of things in a condominium, but there's two kinds of common elements. There's general common elements everybody owns together, everybody gets to use. Sometimes it's the studs in the walls, sometimes it's the courtyard where they have a fire pit, right? Then there's limited common elements. Those are things that are really mine to use if I'm a unit owner. It's assigned to my unit, and nobody else can go there, nobody else can put their stuff there. It's an exclusive easement, effectively. And the most common ones are porches, Well, the most common ones are porches. What are porches made out of? Concrete. Who likes to pour concrete before they're finished with their building? No one. Or the pathways, or. There's a lot of different things like that. So this allows us to not worry about the course of construction and having to put my flat work in front of things that don't, in a timeline that doesn't make sense. Because what they mean by measuring a limited common element is like to the 100th of an inch. You have to have poured that parking space, or you have to have poured that porch. So that can be kind of if you don't time things right, it can really create significant delay in getting your plat approved and your condominium ready to sell. So that's kind of spiffy. The other one is about escrow. So for residential condominiums, there are rules about escrow accounts. And you sign, every condo declarant signs something that gives the commissioner of the Oregon Real Estate Agency the right to examine their escrow accounts and their records. So it's a big deal. This is one of those consumer protection things. It's always been the case that if you took earnest money, or more to the point, money for an upgrade, like if you were selling condominiums and you could offer, you know, expensive counters or maybe less expensive counters and people could choose, that became less and less common because you would take, you could take the money to pay for that upgrade while you were building it, but you couldn't use it. As the developer, they had to come up with that money, put it into the home, maybe lose that buyer, have the expensive counters, lose the money that was paid to pay for the expensive counters because it was returned to the buyer. Point is, this got changed. Why did this get changed? I don't know. Somebody did it. The Home Builder Association was like, excuse me, I'd really like to be able to, this is what I suspect, I don't know this. Shannon probably knows it in real time because I didn't listen to all of the conversations around this and all of the hearings. I know that Shannon did. But that's the effect. It would enable a developer to do upgrades, you know, to contract for an upgrade, to take a deposit on an upgrade, to spend that deposit on the upgrade because they could disperse it from their escrow account. In the past, not one penny, regardless of what it was for, how it was going to be used, out of earnest money for a condominium could be released before closing. So there's my two nerdy little Yahoo moments on this one. I also wanted to clarify that the effective date, as far as I can tell, and honestly, reading statutes, this is one of the things that should be easy but never is. Like, when does it become effective? So it's got a January 1st, 2026. I read versions of this that were going to be effective upon signature by the governor. That's not how it all panned out. And it's true that none of this applies to an association whose declaration, that would be CC&Rs for planned communities or a condominium declaration for a condo, if the declaration was recorded before January 6, 2026, January 1st, 2026, sorry. So what I'm doing now is I'm writing these into my condo documents already, all the procedures, all the notices, and because sometimes it takes 3 or 4 months to get a condominium from my first drafting to approval and sales. So best practice, that's probably the thing to do right now, so you don't have to amend them as of, you know, January 5th or something. So also, I've been writing this stuff into my documents for 20 years almost. The need to go to the membership to initiate a lawsuit like this and get a 75% vote. I have also put notice requirements to the ownership warnings in there about what it would be, what the effect of entering into, as a plaintiff, a claim. And I should say that most of my clients are developers, but I have definitely been on the other side, even with a developer still as the interim director and needing to sue a general contractor or subcontractor on behalf of the association. So I've, you know, kind of run the whole gambit, but I usually, as my colleagues that represent only associations, they say I wear the black hat, I say I wear the white So just, again, by way of full disclosure. Questions? And we'll go back to that gentleman there.
Processing, sometimes I'm a little bit slow. You mentioned partway in that this legislation actually goes back and touches other things. So what I'm trying to be clear about is the change to the statute of repose only under the umbrella of planned communities and condos? That didn't change that construction law for all construction.
That is correct. Yeah. And it's because 12-135 talks about associations being either the property being owned by an association or maintained by an association for the claims. Yeah, I don't believe that this affects single-family homes on single lots, and I don't think it was meant to. Shannon says wasn't meant to, and it doesn't. We're happy to report. Or other kinds of construction. Yeah, and just FYI, I mean, a condominium is nothing more than an ownership regime. I condominiumize boat slips. I condominiumize aircraft hangars as things that look like single-family homes but are on a collectively owned piece of property. Cottage clusters is kind of the common name, or PUDs, planned unit developments. Yeah, it's very common now. Okay, go ahead. Cottage cluster question.
Yeah, I'm an architect. I work on projects with a nonprofit in Central Oregon, and they've done cottage clusters both on fee simple tax lots and now they're moving towards condo plats. Yeah. But it sounds like if they do a condo plat and they also roll in exterior maintenance into the HOA, these are community land trust models.
Yes.
If they include the exterior maintenance, does that then push it into the condominium law and not the planned community law?
Okay, so I think the question was, our friend is an architect. He works with a CLT on Eastern Oregon, right? And they've been building a lot of cottage clusters, some which have homes on small lots, and some which are condominiums, meaning that they're on a big parcel of land, and that land is owned in common. You get an undivided interest in all the common elements as well as ownership of your unit when you buy a condo unit. And your question was, if on the lots, when I have a home that's a detached home on a lot, if I were to have the association have some responsibility for taking care of the exterior, would that then allow that development to enjoy, or that developer to enjoy, the shortened statute of repose? Now, this is getting into like, hey, what'll happen next with this? My opinion is yes. How much exterior maintenance is the first thing I was thinking of, because I have had Habitat for Humanity clients of various ilks, and we have built single-family homes, and but then we realized, it would be great just to have a collective savings account for the roofs. And so we had the HOA responsible just for the roofs, just for replacing the roofs when they needed to be replaced, and that would effectively force collective savings for those roofs, right? So they'd all be done when they needed to be done, et cetera. Townhomes particularly, in my opinion, are important that way, because if you own a row house and you're in the middle and the roof needs to be replaced and you have saved for a roof, but your owner on either side of you has not and doesn't have the money to replace the roof, you can replace your roof. I bought one of these recently. You can replace the roof, but you won't get a warranty, because it's going to be seamed up with an old roof. No warranty for you. No soup for you if that's what you do. So I usually advise my clients, and not all of them take this advice, but if they're building row homes even on single lots, zero lot line, I really strongly suggest that they have the association collecting reserves so that collectively that roof can be done all at once when it needs to be done. But they don't have to. So the statute, the Planned Community Act, allows for them to do something different. The balance is going to be, if the association's not responsible for exterior maintenance, again, what extent, I don't know, would trigger one or the other or not. They don't have to do these inspections. So which leads me to want to clarify one more thing, if I may. Please. Before I take your, you know me. I'll get to you, I promise. So, who pays for those inspections? So the fact of the matter is, for a developer, actually complying with this is not very complicated. It's really not. What you need to do, if you're not exempt, right, and you're building a condominium or you're building attached housing, which, just a condominium, sorry, you're building a condominium, whatever ilk it is, and there's some maintenance, or all maintenance of the exterior done by the association. Who pays for those? Who pays, and who pays for those moisture intrusion inspections? The first one, the report, the way you get there is in the statute. It says, among like 45 other things you have to deliver at turnover, including the plans, and the permits, and the names of all the contractors, you have to also give the association the record of the report of a moisture intrusion inspection that you had done. And that's how they get to the, you must do one of those before turnover, not sales, before turnover. The second year inspection, I think for a lot of the iterations of this bill, it required the declarant or the developer to actually put some money into reserves and fund that, like directly fund it. There's no modifications to either the reserve statutes in the Planned Community Act, which doesn't require these inspections in the first place, but there's nothing in the Condominium Act that was modified by this bill that has to do with reserves. It doesn't change that section of the Condominium Act as a practical matter. So, compliance, easy. All the things you need to consider as a developer, a lot more complicated, because as a practical matter, if you need to have a $5,000 inspection done at year 2, that could raise your assessments to the, not a lot, but you'd still have to save that $5,000 in just 2 years' time. So depending on how many units you have, that could be more or less of an impact on those assessments. And people right now, again, going back to that original comment, are sensitive about those assessments because of the interest rates. So that calculation is going to be an economic and a marketing calculation for the developer about whether they actually fund the reserves or not, and whether the market will bear the assessments that would be necessary to make savings for, to pay for the second year and the 6th year inspection that would be required. So that's my reading of it. That's how it's going to work.
If I might embellish on that a little bit too, those moisture special inspections, that is also a deliberate choice to use existing statute language in Oregon that's quite broad. So it really is a matter of, in a sense, I'm going to say, choose your own adventure, how intensive an inspection you do, but also as a builder who wants an association to be feeling secure that their reserves are calculated correctly and that they know things are in good repair and you aren't going to be surprised with the lawsuit later, I would encourage any builder to go ahead and fund a really good inspection at year 2, right? And then the association, again, is going to choose their own adventure for that last inspection for sure. And I think I worked out that with just 20 members in a condo, I believe it was something like $12.80 a month to pay for a $15,000 inspection. So again, like everyone paying a little for that peace of mind and not being vulnerable to any kind of like predatory legal activity, right? We think it's a positive policy shift.
Agreed. All right, my friend, your question. So many questions. He has so many questions. All right, we have 6 minutes. So go for it.
We talked about the insurance, right?
We've talked about the insurance a little.
The ambiguity in this, we buy 100-year buildings, right?
The ambiguity is significant for our friend here because he buys 100-year buildings.
Right? Yeah, it's very difficult
Yes.
to navigate this.
Yes. Hard to navigate.
Are shared wall agreements a better choice?
Are shared wall agreements a better choice? So a shared wall agreement is only possible if you have attached housing that has a 0 lot line wall. And that's your only attachment. A shared wall agreement for like flats that are stacked, impossible. Like, because every wall is shared, so how do you do that? And with whom are you going to share the responsibilities for the joists under yours and the, anyway. You cannot do that with flats. You can do it with townhomes, but only if you go through the process of a subdivision. I'm just gonna put a plug out there for condominiums. A subdivision opens you up to all kinds of exactions and hearings and notices by the local jurisdiction. The advantage of a condominium is none of that happens. You get your permits, so whatever conditions of approval you have to go through and whatever you have to do to get your permits to build a multifamily building, you do that. But then, to make it into units that can be sold separately for home ownership, no local exactions, no local hearings, no local notices. And because I got really upset with a couple of jurisdictions, a few, almost 10 in the end, they were putting more and more expensive, in some cases, fees and signatures and approvals by the engineer, even though that engineering is not a thing with a condominium. It's like, you don't move a pipe. You're just going to say who owns it. That's what a condo plat does. You're not going to build it. So all of that got wiped out 2 years ago under the amendment. I don't remember the bill, but it amended 100-022. And I'm very happy about that. Yes, another question? Just one more? Is there anyone else with a question? Ooh. Okay, we have one. Yes. Okay.
Curious, in the process of writing the bill and doing the research for it, did you look at other North American cities like Vancouver, BC, or something where there's like lots of condos and it's a very healthy market? How they achieve that?
I'm going to let you answer this one. So this is a good question. The question was, in doing research in preparation for writing and advocating for the bill, did the research include other North American cities? The example given was Vancouver, BC, where there's thousands of condominium units that go sky high everywhere. And I'm going to let Shannon answer that.
Yeah, fabulous question. So here's my two-part answer. And I also want to talk through like how much I've been part of a great team. So I don't want to take too much credit here either. So what became House Bill 3746, the source for that was largely legislation that almost got passed several years earlier. So that's where we did have a starting place coming into this session. And while that may have been brilliant work to do, all of the research I'm aware of was directed at other states in the United States of America. So great question, though. And I mean, I want to also say the following, right? Like, I'm not an attorney. I've worked in the nonprofit space, and we get to do advocacy, and we have super accessible legislators in the state, right? So keep moving your own good ideas forward. I think this whole Housing Oregon conference is the best example of leaderful ecosystems, right? Like, we're all active parts of this affordable housing ecosystem, playing wonderful roles with our own good ideas. So there can be more improvements. Like, there can be more improvements for sure. And I think with that, just thank you for bearing with us on a pretty technical topic at the end of the day. Thank you, Mark McMullen, for creating the context for this. Thank you, Michelle DeRosa, for your expertise. And thank you all for bearing with us. My closing plug, just because I feel like I need to say it, Talia had to leave from Oregon Housing and Community Services. Michelle can help. Lyft Home Ownership can play with condos. They have to be leasehold condos, to let you know. And I think I see Thea from DLCD in the back. Again, one tiny, tiny player in Oregon's progressive land use. The whole team at Department of Land Conservation and Development doing just such amazing work here with promoting our housing density and housing access statewide. So again, very leaderful ecosystem, and thank you so much for being here.